You're listening to Let the Beat Build, a music production podcast where I, your host, MARCELINO VILLALPANDO, interviews music producers and have them walk us through their creative process. Today on the show, we have a producer by the name of Koresma. His music can be found on NPR's All Things Considered. He's been number one on Hype Machine several times, and you can find him early March in Nashville, opening for the artist Closing. Today, we're going to talk about the track Fork in the Road, which is off his EP East. Before we hop into the conversation, let's take a listen to some of his music first. First off, thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And for those who don't know who you are, why don't you introduce yourself a bit? Kind of give us a little backstory about how you got into music and production.
What's up, everyone? I'm Ryan. I make music as Koresma, and best kind of description of my sound is it's chill electronic music that uses a mixture of acoustic and electronic sounds. I got into production about 6 years ago when I was 20, started recording in GarageBand, and eventually moved into Ableton just because it opened up a world of possibilities.
Most people I've had on the show so far really like Ableton a lot.
Yeah, it's a great DAW. I mean, you can do anything with all of the DAWs out, but it definitely has a pretty creative aspect to it.
Yeah, definitely very user-friendly and intuitive.
For sure. That's the main thing. They think about the producer.
Right. I know a lot of people who use it primarily for like live performances.
Yeah, it's super capable for live and in the studio, so just having the flexibility is really why I love it.
Right. Who are some of your early production influences?
Yeah, I started out getting into music with the guitar, so I really was into Jimi Hendrix and Bob Marley and Sublime starting out, and that got me into leaning into more electronic music too. So I was really getting into instrumental hip hop with like Pete Rock and then Flying Lotus, and then now into like Bonobo and Tycho. So those are a lot of the guys I look up to.
That's interesting because definitely listen to your music. Those elements do come out. You have the electronic feel, but also a very, very organic feel, but also like a very like sampling feel. Yeah,
I love the approach of sampling. So that's one of the things in hip hop when I got into the genre, especially like instrumental hip hop. I didn't realize that they were sampling. I thought they were all expert jazz musicians.
That's funny because I remember when I first told my cousin about sampling and I broke it to him, he was crushed. Like he was so heartbroken that these guys weren't playing the instrument or they weren't singing themselves. But he was like 8, so he didn't really know what was going on.
I feel that, man. I definitely had to come to terms with sampling myself. I came from the perspective of being a musician, so when I heard that people just took records and then flipped them, I just didn't understand it at first,
Right.
But now that I realize that it's a very creative way to take and interpret music, and it opens up so many doors. I definitely respect people that sample because it's just another way to be creative.
No, I love sampling. Some of my favorite music of all time includes samples. That's my favorite part in Fork of the Road is the horns that you sample for the chorus.
Thanks, man.
I just thought it brought like a cool aspect to it, and it's definitely, Fork in the Road is definitely one of your more emotional tracks in your whole entire catalog, and I think that horn just like does it,
I appreciate it, man.
What did you start off with this beat? Was it the horns, or what element did you start off with?
I started with the drums, and I started with the brushed snare groove to begin the track. So basically just chopped up a brushed snare groove, and I used all the individual little hits to make up my own pattern for the song. The brushes really gave the song the vibe, and it also gave it a really jazzy vibe too. So then I put in a modern kick and snare around the brush snare groove and layered it with some hi-hats as well. I really love this one rim shot I use a lot. I pitched it to the song to make it fit in this track. The sound sits really well in the mix, so I use it in a lot of tracks. To create the sub, I used a basic sine wave patch and operator in Ableton. I used my keyboard to play out the melody for the bass and eventually found the right line and matched it up to syncopate with the drums. felt like the bass needed to be a little more full, so I used an old recording of upright bass from my friend Brandon to sample one note to add to the bass line. I took that one shot sample and put it in Simpler, which is a simple sampler in Ableton, and then used the MIDI data from the subline to then make that layer for the bass. To get the two sounds to fit together, I cut out the lows of the upright bass and then layered in the sine wave an octave below to give it a nice full sound. Once I had the drums and the bass line down, the next step was to add in the chord progression. The bass line was already really implying what the chord progression was, so I found a nice key patch, it was electric piano in Ableton, and then I laid down that chord progression. I went to some old records that I have and was looking for just, some interesting sounds that were either had a groove to them or had a melody. And I found this horn sample, and I ended up using one note from the horn sample, and I laid it out in the rhythm that I wanted, and I chopped up each of the segments into their own individual audio clips and then pitched them to make the melody that I had in my head. I really love the sound and the quality that comes from vinyl. It brings a hip-hop type aesthetic to whatever song you're working on. There were all these little bends and inflections in the sample, and as I started to pitch it to create the melody, it really accentuated those elements and gave it an interesting quality. At this point, I needed something else to just give the song some diversity, so naturally, guitar being my main instrument, I layered that in next. And it also helped accentuate the chord progression, give the song some extra groove. Acoustic guitar is something I like to throw in my music a lot because it sounds really natural, and in this song, I felt like it could use a nice wooden element to bring it back to earth. I often put guitar in my song because, one, it's my primary instrument, and two, I feel like it's a way I can get my voice across in the song without actually singing. So I often put it in tracks just to give it something that makes it sound unique or sounds like me. When I find melodies, I often just loop a section of the song and then jam over it for a while until something clicks. For this guitar part, I really wanted to add in a new element to the track. I felt like it needed to change, and with this part of the song, I actually changed the chord progression to kind of give it a lift and feel like it got somewhere else. And I think that goes back into how I like to shape things in a positive light when I make music. I was using that in a way to give it a positive, optimistic outlook on the song. I layered the guitar with the trumpet. This line happens more than once and acts as the pre-chorus. It's a way to prime anyone who's listening for what's about to happen next. For the trumpet in this track, it was pretty much all recorded by my friend Ryan out in LA. A lot of times when I'm working on a song, I will throw in an instrument that I feel like could fit in the mix well, just to see how it sounds. For this trumpet line, I sampled it from an old song we were working on and down-pitched it to fit the track. I duplicated the trumpet line and pitched one of the layers up by a fourth to create a nice harmony. I panned the two trumpet lines left and right to create a wider stereo field for the song. I really liked this part because they were at different intervals and kind of had a dissonant quality to it, and it made the song feel melancholic. It also created a pooling effect that gave the next chorus that was coming in more of a release. After using this sampled trumpet for a while, I realized that a live trumpet would sound really cool in the song, so I hit up Ryan, and he sent me back a bunch of live recordings. It's really amazing these days how we're able to collaborate without even being in the same space. Literally can send files across the country, and he can record in LA while I'm sitting in North Carolina. Working with him is really easy because he always lays down super awesome parts, and it's really nice just to be able to trust someone when they're in the studio. He was really soloing over the whole track, and then went back and chopped up the best parts of his performance to make a really dope melody. Just working with other people brings a whole new voice to your music, which I think is really awesome because you just can do things that you would never do by yourself. You can always find something that allows you to get inspired or try something new through that experience. Working with people on your tracks too also allows for you to take a more conversation-like approach to the music you're making. I really like to be able to have a call and response where one person gets to say something and then I can say my part, and together it's like we're forming a sentence, and creates a pretty awesome experience that you don't get by yourself. On the whole, I really like to keep my music chill. I like to make people feel good from it, and I also just want it to be a relaxing experience that hopefully can give you some peace of mind in this daily stress that we all go through.
Yeah, thanks for sharing the track, man. I really appreciate it. The part that honestly really plucked the chord with me was when you combine the two panned trumpets left and right. It kind of gave me a sense of, it kind of felt like a New Orleans funeral march. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of felt like you're sending someone off.
That's an interesting take on it. Yeah, I definitely had a feeling of two things being pulled apart, which was why I called the track Fork in the Road, actually. It's like more about the decision you have to take and like the decision for your life, you know, thinking about it on kind of like a broad scale. And yeah, there's a lot of times that pulling feeling that's involved with it. So through this track, I wanted to represent that feeling, but at the same time, give a positive resolution.
It was definitely an emotional roller coaster. It felt like a story being told with a 3-act structure.
Yeah, I try to take that approach. I definitely like a song that feels like it reaches a climax and goes on a journey rather than just like does a loop or a beat the whole time. So I guess like, you know, songwriting is something I pay a lot of attention to, and trying to give like an ebb and flow and the energy and the emotion if that is available in the track.
No, that definitely came across. I really dig this track a lot. I think it complements the whole entire project East very well.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
And I know you're doing a larger concept project. Do you mind elaborating on that?
Yeah, man. So over the next year, I'm releasing kind of an interactive album. The idea is called Next Frontier, so that's the name of the album. And I'm going to take like a different approach to releasing it. I'm going to be releasing 4 EPs to make up that album. So it's going to be East, West, North, and South. And so those are going to be coming over the next year.
That's cool, man. And what kind of gave you that idea to base it off of the 4 directions?
Yeah, I mean, traveling and just landscapes in general have always been a really inspiring thing for me. So I felt like at this point in my life where I'm kind of like taking a jump and it's a lot of uncertainty, I felt like it's a good way to explore, and what better way to do that through music and, you know, landscapes and places.
That's a really cool concept, man. I like that a lot. So you were telling me earlier that you recently took the leap to do music full time. Do you mind expanding on that for the listeners?
Yeah, I decided to go full-time music this year. It's been in the works for about 6 years when I started my project, and I felt like this is the time to do it.
How did you come to the conclusion that this time was the time? Because I know a lot of people in a similar situation are reluctant to kind of pull that trigger, maybe financial reasons. You know, you obviously need to pay your bills. There's a lot that goes into making that decision. So how did you know that this time was now?
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at what I've been making financially from music over the past year, and it's also been a really strong goal for me to do music as my full-time job for a long time now. So I've been keeping those in check with each other, and so at this point, I was really, you know, this project I'm undertaking right now, I wanted to really be able to spend the time and go in on those tracks. So,
well, congratulations on making that decision.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. There's actually like a few things I think like any producers out there are looking to get to this point that kind of helped me with my life is really, one, just understanding that this is the way you want to go with your life. So you want to do music for your living, and that's like really important to you. So you take those steps to make it happen. Two, the jobs that you take, make sure they're either allowing you to have the mental freedom to be like fresh enough when you get home to work on music, or they're jobs that are going to be pushing your skill level more towards what you want to do. And then lastly, just live below your means. That's something my dad's always told me. So if you're able to do that, you're not going to have a lot of overhead expenses, and you'll be able to jump ship when it's time.
That's some good insight, especially with the 9-to-5 jobs. Like, you definitely don't want to do anything that's going to take all your energy. Like, you gotta, I don't know, any 9-to-5 job I've ever had, I was kind of just like, not that I didn't try, but I was just good enough. I wasn't the worst employee, and I definitely wasn't going to get employee of the month.
But it's also not your main goal in life. So
right. One thing I want to touch on, I really dig your cover art for a lot of your albums. They have a lot of cool like landscape images. Is that what Asheville looks like? Is that your surroundings, or?
Yeah. So my East EP, that was Asheville. I was taken about 30 minutes from my house, and that photo was taken by my brother. And we just took a little trip up to this place called Craggy Gardens, and we snapped the photo.
I'm sure that's a great source of inspiration.
Yeah, for sure. Nature is a huge inspiration to my music. The local scenery of Asheville and the Blue Ridge Mountains was actually a huge driving force for the inspiration behind my EP East.
How so?
I've always been inspired by my surroundings. They definitely are super important in my life and just like for my well-being. So musically, I take a lot of inspiration from that too. A big documentary that I really loved called Muscle Shoals talked about how the sound of that area was held in this river, and a lot of people would say that they would hear the river singing. So you have this certain vibe that was built into the music of that area. And another composer I really like named Antonios Carlos Jobim,
right.
He also talks about how the waves of the ocean in Brazil are the influence behind his percussion in the bossa nova music he makes. So you can hear it where there's all these different layers, and it's just kind of churning and never settling. And it's very much like the ocean. And the same goes for a lot of the Muscle Shoals music. So wrapping that up, I definitely feel like the surroundings you're in influence the music you make. And for myself, I really wanted to get into these different environments to make the EP.
That's cool, man. Well, Koresma, thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, man. It was great talking to you.
So I think it's time to listen to the full arrangement of Fork in the Road. You mind introducing it?
Yeah, here's Fork in the Road. Hope you all enjoy.
So why don't you tell everybody where we can find your music at?
Yeah, you guys can find me on Spotify. Just type in Koresma. It's Koresma, and I'll be up right there. I'm on SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, wherever you want to listen. Music should be there.
I want to thank Koresma once again for coming on today's episode and giving us a glimpse of the man behind the music. I also want to thank you, the listener, for spending your time with us. You could have been anywhere else in this world, but you're here with us, and I appreciate that. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to share it with a friend. Let the Beat Build is now found everywhere podcasts are found, including Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud. Thank you again. I'm your host, Marcelino Villalpando. This is Let the Beat Build. Peace.